The La Crosse Public Library Archives presents Dark La Crosse Stories, a series in collaboration with the La Crosse Tribune, featuring the seedier side of La Crosse, Wisconsin's history. These true stories are reflections of their time and place in history. The intent is not to diminish the human suffering that may have resulted from these events, but to bring light to ways in which people in the past experienced life. The city of La Crosse and the locations where these stories took place occupy part of a vast network of the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk, and we thank our Ho-Chunk community members and their ancestors for their stewardship of this area's land and history.
In September of 1920, the exciting place to be was the newly built theater in downtown La Crosse, the Rivoli. Such was its splendor, the La Crosse Tribune struggled to capture its magnificence in ink, though they tried with the following description.
The new Rivoli Theatre is a noble place to be, an edifice that is not a whit overdescribed by the word grandeur, but it is a difficult place to portray in words. A description must take it up detail by detail and explain its beauties piecemeal. And that fails to give the complete effect, because the Rivoli is one of those successes of harmonious architectural and decorative effort, in which every part is graceful and beautiful, and the whole is more than the sum of its parts. The Rivoli would be stately and impressive without a brush mark, simply by virtue of its clean proportions, sweeping lines, and well-handled masses. Add the charming decorations, which emphasize the architectural grace, which give a note of color fittingly restrained and subdued to harmony instead of contrast. The delicate colors of the lighting system and the tones and shadings permitted by its control to bring out the lines and shadows of the theater's architecture and the harmonies of its decorative scheme of walls and hangings. Then, as a medium for the proper seeing of the whole, let the great organ fill the structure with rolling and crashing and pealing harmonies, or if the mood suits, with flutings and whisperings. Not until the whole effect is complete in its details of line, color, light, and harmony does the beholder get the full beauty of the Rivoli.
The creator of the grand organ inside the Rivoli was a musician named Walter Goetzinger, a, quote, wizard of music. It was built according to the ideas and specifications of Goetzinger and initially turned down by two famous organ makers before a third stated, quote, it could be done, but nobody could play it after it was finished. Walter Goetzinger made a name for himself through his musical talent several years prior to the Rivoli's erection. Born visually impaired, he graduated from the Janesville School for the Blind. He spent some time living in Milwaukee and even New York City before moving to La Crosse in 1906 at the age of 21. Described as a rare genius with perfect technique, Goetzinger started out playing in area theaters and parlors such as the Hotel Law and the Bijou, performing concerts and scoring silent movies.
Marvelous. The man is simply marvelous. I saw him 2 nights ago at the Bijou, and would you believe it? He offered to play any song as long as the requester could whistle it for him first. And by golly, he did it. The man is a genius.
Though Goetzinger was born blind, he never stopped meeting with specialists about the possibility of recovering his sight. Through a recommendation from Dr. John Bradfield in 1912, he was put in touch with Dr. D. Woods of Chicago, known to be one of the best eye specialists in the country who, after hearing Goetzinger's case, believed there was hope for restoration. The next time Goetzinger's name pops up in the Tribune, he was throwing a benefit concert to raise funds for an eye surgery, though not his own.
Apparently, they both went to see that specialist in Chicago, and despite the doctor telling Mr. Goetzinger that nothing could be done for his own eyesight, his wife's vision could be improved, and now the man is hosting a concert to raise money for her procedure. What a dear!
The outcome of the surgery for Louise Goetzinger is unknown, as there is no further mention of her optical health in the papers. The notoriety of her husband, however, continued to grow over the years. By 1915, Goetzinger's life appeared to be a successful one. He was widely recognized for his musical talent and well-liked among society. He was working regularly at the best movie houses in La Crosse, performing silent film scores live. 2 years later, however, fans may have been surprised to read in the La Crosse Tribune the following notice.
La Crosse, Wisconsin, April 25th, 1917. To all merchants, dealers, and others interested, and to the public in general, I hereby notify each of you that from and after this date, I will not be responsible for any debt, obligation, or liability, claim, or demand incurred by my wife, Louise M. Goetzinger, in any amount or upon any account whatsoever. Signed, Walter Goetzinger.
A court hearing in mid-December of 1917 began the case of Goetzinger versus Goetzinger, with the courtroom filled by friends of both parties. Rumors of sensational charges against Walter Goetzinger made by his wife Louise made the trial even more of a spectacle.
Isn't it sad that their 3 children aren't even staying with the family now? They're being looked after by relatives in Milwaukee, and after all they've both overcome. I heard he's denied his wife the use of their home and vehicle.
The court ordered Walter to pay $15 a week to his wife, so she's not without some means. If you ask me, she's getting more than she should.
Ruled by Judge Higbee, with the jury made up of 12 married men, the trial began on December 19th. Walter Goetzinger was suing his wife on the charge of misconduct, the witness statements against her depicting multiple accounts of raucous behavior, hotel stays with several different men, and indecent dress after she was kicked out of a community dance for wearing a short skirt. Thomas Dowling, a machinist from La Crosse, and Harry Stone, a boxer from Milwaukee, both testified to taking Mrs. Goetzinger out on multiple occasions. They believed Mrs. Louise Goetzinger was Miss Louise Marden.
So many witness accounts of neighbors seeing a man enter Mrs. Goetzinger's home through a side window. They say she's been attending parties at roadhouses and dances where drinking is involved.
Throughout the trial, Louise Goetzinger tried to explain or deny the charges against her. Attempts to discredit the character of her husband Walter, saying he too had been unfaithful, all failed. His notoriety as a local talent and the fact that he was visually impaired and yet able to perform so prodigiously seemed to steer the public's view to Walter's side of the story.
If the worst thing she can say about him is that he drinks sometimes, all I can say is what hard-working man doesn't?
Louise broke down in tears while on the stand. She denied having been inside any saloons and instead named several of the witnesses as men who tried to sell her an automobile. She claimed she had never gone out all night with Thomas Dowling and only registered at the hotel as Miss Marden because she was too embarrassed to register as a married woman alone. In counter to Harry Stone's testimony, Louise stated she knew Harry and had accepted money from him, but only because she was starving and had not yet received her alimony. "Did he promise to marry you?" asked James Thompson, attorney for her husband. "I don't know," replied Louise. "Well, isn't it a fact he wanted to marry you?" asked Thompson again. "Well, I just don't know," said Louise. She paused a long moment, then added, "I don't know how to put it."
I hate to see any woman made into a spectacle in public. Women are judged so harshly as it is. But even if she didn't visit the saloons like they said, she admitted going to hotels with Mr. Stone.
And what about Stone promising to make prize fighters out of her children?
Then she admitted to allowing another man,
Albert Herman, a whiskey salesman, and quite her senior. The man was nearly 70 years old.
Yes, that's the one. She admitted to letting him kiss her. She said it was only on the forehead and that she only permitted it because her mother told her to be nice to him. But why was he in her home with her alone? It's all so distressing.
Witness accounts by men who claimed to have fooled around with Mrs. Goetzinger grew to be more scandalous and ridiculous as the case went on. Louise's attorney attempted to get one witness to declare he'd been bribed to testify against Louise, though he claimed that was false and he had indeed fooled around with her. The courtroom full of the gossiping public began laughing so loud that Judge Higbee reprimanded them, scolding, quote, "All of you are privileged to remain, but you may not whisper, talk, or laugh, and if there is any further demonstration, I will order the sheriff to clear the courtroom." Of the myriad men who testified to being out with Louise Goetzinger, it was Harry Stone, the Milwaukee boxer, who the plaintiff's attorney spent the most time on. Stone admitted to registering with Louise at several hotels, as well as naming numerous instances of misconduct. For her defense, Louise stated that Stone was insane. She had no idea what he was talking about and denied all allegations. Evidence brought forth noted that Harry Stone fell 4 stories as a child, suffering injuries to the head. However, he hadn't required medical attention for the last 10 years and claimed to be of sound mind.
Goetzinger's brother William took the stand as a witness to Louise and Stone's frivolities. He's a policeman in Milwaukee, and he saw the pair kissing in a doorway for over an hour.
After that testimony, Goetzinger's lawyer smartly rested his case. The jury only deliberated for 30 minutes. Seems like they believed the testimonies of Harry Stone and Thomas Dowling. They found Louise guilty on 3 accounts of misconduct.
Following the divorce proceedings in December of 1917, custody of the Goetzinger children, ages 9, 7, and 5, was awarded to William Goetzinger, the police officer and brother of Walter, who lived in Milwaukee. However, Louise's mother made claims to the court that William was pro-German and therefore disloyal to the United States. Unable to substantiate her claims with any tangible evidence, Judge Higbee dismissed her protest, and another dramatic scene unfolded in the courthouse when Louise and her mother bid tearful goodbyes to the 3 children as they left. Since it was Louise who was found to be ill-fit morally, it was she who was denied custody of her children and allowed visitation only once per month. Family members of Louise stated they witnessed Walter's abuse of Louise, listing choking, hitting, and name-calling in an attempt to impact the custody hearing. Denied by Walter, it almost didn't matter at this point in the legal proceedings, as a statement came from a La Crosse attorney indicating Louise had threatened to shoot her children rather than have them taken from her. Once more, Louise denied making any such statement. After having granted the divorce, Judge Higbee granted temporary custody of the children to their uncle in Milwaukee, and in a separate hearing 2 months later, agreed to custody by their father. With help from Walter's stepparents, the court allowed the children to live in La Crosse, which increased visitation for Louise from once per month to every 2 weeks. Only the settlement of property remained to be assessed.
How do you like that? She was originally awarded a car, but ends up with a commode.
You shouldn't poke fun. Mrs. Goetzinger is clearly a woman facing many tribulations.
The initial award by Judge Higbee to Louise Goetzinger included the choice between an automobile or $650 cash. However, a later decree came down superseding the original award and instead entitled Louise to just a dresser, a commode, and a set of china dishes gifted by her mother. Little of Louise Goetzinger was mentioned again, except for a return to her maiden name of Marden about a year after the legal battle. Around that same time, in 1919, Walter remarried to Lily Lowry of Waukesha. The couple lived on State Street in La Crosse with his children. It seems Walter's name would always find its way into the papers, first for fame due to his musical talent, then for the salacious divorce trial. Just 4 months after his second marriage, his name again appeared in the La Crosse Tribune after surviving an explosion at the Bijou Theatre where he was scoring a film.
The fire started near the box office and swept into the projection room. All the gas was coming through a vent that built up and blew out 2 of the windows. 9 people were injured, and while everyone was fleeing the theater, Walter kept playing the organ.
Did no one tell him they were evacuating? I heard 75 people ran out of the building from every exit. Lucky for them, the projection room contained most of the explosion. It was the folks nearest that room, or a few in front, who suffered injuries. One of them was Gordon Goetzinger, the 8-year-old son of our blind organist. He's lucky to be alive. The theater operator was so badly burned, he was taken to St. Francis Hospital.
Walter Goetzinger continued to score movies almost nightly at theaters in La Crosse. His ability to memorize multiple film plots and time his compositions accordingly was astounding. So when the new Rivoli Theatre opened its doors in 1920, it's no wonder they allowed Goetzinger to design his own organ, and that it became the focal point of the theater's majesty. The stunning structure the La Crosse Tribune struggled to put into print became the place where Goetzinger played his custom organ for the next 5 years. By 1925, the organist who overcame severe visual impairment to become a beloved part of the cultural fabric of La Crosse said a bittersweet farewell at a banquet thrown by the local musicians' union in his honor. Walter Goetzinger was leaving La Crosse and the Rivoli for Milwaukee. For 15 years here in La Crosse, Goetzinger was an admired and respected musician and considered a friend by many in the area. Sentiments of gratitude and best wishes went around on both ends, but it was his duty, Goetzinger felt, to follow an opportunity that beckoned him to a larger crowd. Goetzinger was off to a new beginning in Milwaukee, but his name would be far from forgotten in La Crosse headlines or the courtroom. His story continues in the next Dark La Crosse Stories episode. And now I'd like to welcome in Anita Taylor-Doring, Senior Archivist and Archives Department Manager at the La Crosse Public Library, who did some of the initial research for this story.
Despite his physical challenges, Walter Goetzinger arrived on the La Crosse music scene at only 21 years of age in 1906. He attended the State School for the Blind in Janesville, Wisconsin, and maintained ties with the school, doing various fundraising concerts and giving back to the school that gave him an opportunity to showcase his notable accomplishments in his chosen field. He had an uncanny memory coupled with perfect technique, which allowed him to play any tune on piano or organ if someone could whistle or hum it. He kept up with current musical styles by having someone else versed in music read him the latest sheet music of popular songs. One of his specialties became playing the organ in local theaters to accompany silent films in La Crosse. From experts I've talked to about this, some sort of short summary or key often accompanied the film reels, but regularly went missing as the canisters were shipped from one theater to the next or back to the company headquarters. Sometimes the key would simply be how to make certain sound effects on the organ, such as rain, wind, airplane noise, bullets, or bombs exploding. There wasn't any written score, so each organist had to interpret the scene and improvise, building up drama or tension and releasing it at the right time. That would be a difficult task for anyone, but especially a musician who did not have sight. While the newspaper articles never say, someone may have coached Goetzinger as to what was happening while the film was flickering on the silver screen, although it is said that he astounded theater goers with his ability to memorize multiple film plots and time his compositions accordingly. When Goetzinger moved to La Crosse in 1906, there were only 2 theaters, the Bijou and the La Crosse Theatre, and the organist played at both. More than just films were shown, these were venues for vaudeville and local performances. As Goetzinger's local popularity rose in 1915, the number of theaters had grown to 8, including 2 on La Crosse's north side. By the time the Rivoli Theatre arrived on the scene in 1920, there was not only the Bijou in La Crosse, but also the Casino, Dome, Majestic, Rex, Rialto, and Strand, all much smaller than the Grand Rivoli. The Rivoli's sister theater, the Riviera, opened on the north side only 1 month after the Rivoli in October of 1920 and was a smaller version of its south side sister, but was also designed by La Crosse architects Parkinson and Dockendorf, and the interior decoration was left to the Oyen firm. At that time, the Cooper Amusement Company operated not only the Rivoli and Riviera, but the smaller Casino, Strand, and Rialto theaters as well. When Goetzinger left La Crosse in 1925, there were 6 theaters or movie houses, but Goetzinger wanted to pursue more opportunities and larger audiences, so he, his children, and second wife Lily headed to Milwaukee. Once the age of silent movies had faded away for good by the end of the decade, Goetzinger had to reinvent himself. He continued his career in a more low-key way and was heard on regional radio waves for several years, sometimes with his wife lending vocal accompaniment. Stay tuned for part 2 of Walter Goetzinger's story after moving to Milwaukee. Perhaps Walter's life would have made for a great dramatic film with synchronized sound and a musical score. Thanks for listening.